在第9课，我们要学习过的语法。我们看一下我们的生词，第一过，还有第二次，这两个是两个很重要的语法点。These are two really important grammar points. This is going to be therefore a pretty long video while I go through both grammar points. I encourage you to listen to the whole thing. Otherwise, please skip around for any parts that you may find helpful. 过 is a so-called particle. Right now, what is in fact, it's called an aspect particle. There are two aspect particles we've learned so far in Chinese. One is le, very important particle, and guo, also very important. Aspect particles are used in place of tense. So like in English, when we talk about verb tense, right, like past, present, future tense, you conjugate the verb to create a tense. Chinese doesn't have those tenses. It employs something called grammatical aspect. And what that means is it uses particles after the verb to indicate how the verb works within a particular time frame, or how the verb relates to the flow of time. English also has aspects. You can think about, for example, the past continuous aspect in English. I have done my homework, which is equivalent to le. 我做了我的功课 is equivalent to saying I have done my homework. Notice the difference between that kind of aspect, grammatical aspect, versus tense, like saying I did my homework, right, which would be past tense. So these are slightly different in meaning. The past continuous is a completed action that happened in the past. But le is also a kind of completed action that happens at a specific time. Well, how do you use 过? How to use this aspect particle? Well, 过 is used, and this is a bit different from any kind of tense in English, but 过 is used to indicate that an action has been experienced in the past. That is, it's used to talk about whether something has ever happened, whether it has been experienced or not. That is to say, the aspect particle le is used to indicate that an action has been completed at a specific time. Unlike 过, a specific time must be stated or implied with the use of le. Le also isn't used with habitual or continuous actions. Okay, so what exactly does this mean with 过 and le? Let's look at an example of le. 我见过李友 or example of 过我见过李友所以知道他很高 okay. So we have a verb here, and then we're going to follow a verb with an aspect particle. And I'm following with the aspect particle 过 because I'm saying I have met her before. So the time when this has happened is not determinate. There's no specific time. And it's whether it's ever happened before. So it's like I have ever met Leo, and that's kind of how 过 translates. I have met Leo at some time in the past. So the particle is used after a verb to indicate a past experience of an indeterminate time frame. Have you ever done something? Oh, by the way, notice we're going to use 过 later on in level 13 as a verb meaning to pass something. So this particle, the 过 as an aspect particle, is very different from that other meaning. So we'll talk about that when we get to it. Let's look at another example. 我在中国城工作过1年，所以我知道怎么找. Okay, so here we have the verb 工作, and then 过 means I have ever worked there, right? So I have in Chinatown worked before. I have worked there before. 中国过. How long have you worked there for? 1年. This is, by the way, this 1年 is not a specific time. Like you don't know, it's not stated when you worked there. Right, it's something called a time duration. It's actually a complement, which was something we'll talk about later. But so don't be confused that there's this time word here It has nothing to do with what's happening before, which is not, it's not where the time is not specified. You don't know when you worked in Chinatown. So 中国工作过, it's like you have worked there before, ever. Once again, expressions of time are often unspecified or complete absence, right? So the implied time for the action is 以前, basically, before. And you can also see 以前 in a sentence explicitly. For example, I can say 我以前去过中国城，知道怎么走. So before, sometime before, right, I have ever been gone to 中国城. 我以前去过中国城. I've been to Chinatown before at some point. You could use an expression indicating a specific time in a sentence with 过 in a specific situation, which doesn't violate this general principle that we've already talked about. For example, if I say 你见过小李吗? Have you ever, right? Have you ever here? That's what this 过 Shula structure means. Have you ever done something in the past? Have you ever experienced something in the past? Have you ever seen or met Li Xiaojie first and before, and then I would say, yes, I've met her, 见过, 上个月还见过. Okay, and this says last month I have met her before. The reason this works is because it's not specifying one instance of the action. We're not saying when the action was completed. You're specifying a general time frame in which this action what happened. Right, 上个月, in some time in the last month, I met her, and so it's a more general statement that doesn't indicate a very specific time. When do I use le? For example, by something like 昨天我见了他. 昨天我做了功课. That would be a very specific time in which the loss particle would be used. All the other instances of time that imply one specific action that we've been using the whole time. That's when, to this point, that's when le is used. Okay, now our second grammatical point today is 次. Now, 次, grammatically speaking, is a measure word for frequency, meaning the number of times something is done. For example, if I say 一次, that means one time. If I say 两次, that means two times. 三次 is three times. 很多次 is many times. Now, because of this unique structure of this measure word, the unique meaning of this measure word, it's a measure word for frequency, you use it in Chinese often to talk about quantity, like to quantify the number of times you've done something, in which case the number of times acts as a complement. It's a complement for quantity. So remember, there are many different kinds of complements. This 次 can be thought of as a complement for quantity, the number of times you've done something. And complements will follow verbs. So for example, if I say, I've been to New York many times, I can say 我去过纽约, right? I've ever been there before. It's the 过 particle. 我去过纽约很多次. And the 次 follows the verb because it's a quantity complement. You can also say 中国城我去过很多次. Same thing. We have 中国城 here is a topic common sentence. You put it in front of the verb, the topic, object goes in front. 中国城我去了很多次. I've been there many times. Again, 吃 is used to indicate that an action is performed a number of times. The number plus 吃 combination follows the verb because it's a complement. Okay, so the structure generally is verb plus number plus 吃 plus object. You could put the 吃 after the object in certain situations, which we'll talk about in a second. But as another example sentence, 去年我去了一次中国，你呢? So last year I went to China one time. How about you? 上午我打了2次电话。So I called twice, right, in the morning. So we use le here because this is one specific action that happened at a specific time, which was in the morning today. 上午我打了2次电话。The 次 here goes generally, again, the 2次 generally goes between the verb and the object because 2次 is as a quantity complement. It usually comes right after the verb and then the aspect particle. Now, not always, if the object is of not a person or place, 次 should be placed between the verb and the object. If the object is a person or a place, 次 could go either between the verb or the object or after the verb. For example, for 纽约, right? 我去过纽约很多次. So you can put this either here at the end. You can use a place, or you can put it here. 我去过很多次纽约. These are essentially equivalent expressions. Look at some more examples. 去年我去了一次中国. Last year I went to China one time. How about you? 去年我去了中国2次. Or you can see how the 次 moves between the question and then the answer. Or I can say, 昨天我找了3次王医生. Or 是吗？昨天我去找了王医生3次. Again, the 次 moves between the verb object and after the object. If the object, this is just a very specific kind of loophole to our general rule that we talked about. If the object is a personal pronoun, 次 must follow the object. For example, 我昨天找了他2次，他都不在. So in this case, if I put the 次 here, that would be wrong. 次 needs to go after a personal pronoun. And that's just a kind of a tricky grammatical usage in Chinese. It's something you just got to remember. So the 次 quantity pronoun, the number plus 次, usually goes between the verb and the object. But after a personal pronoun, it must come after the object. 好，这就是我们今天的2个语法点。谢谢大家的收听。